Chris, how are you, brother?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm super, mate. Super to be talking to you. Friends at home. This is one of the most wonderful men in the podcasting business. And it's my great pleasure because he's a mate of mine. Chris hosts the Old Paratrooper Podcast. And he's absolutely taken the podcasting field by storm with some incredible guests. We'll come on and talk about that. Chris very kindly has had me on the show twice. And more recently, we got this one, Chris, didn't we?
We did indeed, a joint effort. Like I said to you before, I obviously did the hard work with the podcast. You and Louie just obviously rode the Atlantic, so the hard work was obviously done by me.
Yes, mate. To be honest, I'm just going to show friends at home a picture. Look, there we go. There's me and Louie aboard our Atlantic rowing boat. We're about, I don't know, a couple of thousand miles offshore. And we settled down for a live recording of a podcast with Chris, which subsequently went out on YouTube. And we got recognised as a world record first for the first podcast from an Atlantic rowing boat. How was it at your end?
Oh no, it was absolutely fine. I was really, really surprised. Well, firstly, congratulations to you and Louis on obviously an amazing feat of endurance for raising funds for amazing charities, Scottish Little Soldiers and Homes for Veterans, I believe. So hats off to you both, an amazing effort. But from my perspective, I was just amazed how great the signal was from the off. And that was down to you using a particular kind of satellite kind of system, and it was just perfect. It was like you were next door, never mind being in the middle of the Atlantic. So it was brilliant.
Yes, it's the wonders of technology, and to be honest, it was also a first because we had the Starlink, which is, you can say what you like about Elon Musk. It's probably quite a lot of things people would like to say. But when we literally took it so we could fundraise more money for the charities, and to be able to get an internet connection, a high speed, we're talking 150 megabytes download per second, anywhere on the planet is quite, it's quite unique.
Yeah, I was amazed by how clear it was. I have had podcasts with people, done podcasts with people in the next town where the signal's not been as good as that. So yeah, it was incredible, and I'm glad we got it done. And like I say, inadvertently, a kind of a world first, a record that will never ever be broken. No one else can claim to have done that first. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out to me. It was you, in fact, that pointed out that we'd actually done a world record. So brilliant.
Yes, mate. Anything to help out because you deserve it, Chris. Gosh, I was going to say something I've totally forgotten. Oh, yeah. So my next challenge is going to be Everest, or certainly it's going to be at some point in the near future, or as near as I can make it, I should say. It's mad to think you could take a Starlink because the dish is only that big. It weighs probably a bit less than half the weight of a laptop. You take that and a power bank, you could go live from the summit of Everest, which would just be you could.
Well, to be honest, Chris, that's something we could talk about off air, because again, you never know, that could be something else.
Absolutely. But enough about me and Louie and our cough cough record setting Atlantic row. Chris, former paratrooper, you sent me some notes here. Upbringing involved in violence. That won't come as any surprise to most of us who've served in the elite forces. You've been working in Iraq. You've been doing anti-piracy. You say you've got 9 lives. You've been involved with surveillance. I know Gordon Ramsay pops up somewhere there, so maybe you can mention that. You've been quite a good boxer, and you're now in the fire service. So, where should we begin?
Well, yeah, no, I've been around. I've done a bit, and I always say I've done, more than some, not as much as others. And for me, I was all about the experiences. I always wanted to kind of have a story to tell. I wanted to go and experience different things. Now, I know we talked about this before. You had the same sort of thing. But no, growing up, I grew up in a kind of suburb of Nottingham. Great parents. I've got, no qualms with them. But from a young age, sort of early teenagers, I started to get involved in probably not necessarily the wrong crowd, but involved in fighting. It was the sign of the times. It was not unusual for people to go out and drinking in the towns and, have a few beers and get in an altercation. But it got a bit much. It got constant for me. Until basically 17 years of age, I got glassed in the face. I had 16 stitches right around my eye, broken nose, fractured jaw. And that was a bit of a wake up call for me. It was like, firstly, you're not as big and tough as you think you are. And secondly, it was a case of my old man gave me an ultimatum. He says, look, you either join up to the military or you will end up in prison because you're very hot headed. You're getting in a lot of trouble. So yeah, I kind of ended up going down the military route, and I was initially supposed to join the Worcestershire Foresters, which are now, I believe, are they the Mercian Regiment now, Chris? I think amalgamated to the Mercians. I think.
Mate, you're asking someone who's in the Navy to know shit about the army, and it's not my bag, mate. No disrespect to anyone.
No dramas. Well, the Worcestershire Foresters are a local regiment to me in Nottinghamshire at the time, and then they've become the Mercians now. But yeah, I was going to join them, and pretty much on the day of going to the Army Careers Office, me and my best friend just decided to join the Parachute Regiment, and off we went to depot. Yeah.
Yes, I bet you're quite glad about that choice, aren't you?
I am now. At the time, because someone pointed out to me that were like, oh, it's just like the normal infantry. You just jump out of planes. And I was like, yeah, okay. And very quickly, kind of week one, I realized that the fitness and standards were a lot higher than some of the other infantry. Taking nothing away from the other infantry regiments, of course, but the fitness side of it and the beastings and stuff, that it was going to be tough. And it was, it was a wake-up call.
Yeah, I tried to join the RAF, believe it or not. And so I'm trying to think of the SAS chap that was on my podcast, and he said the same. We both went down the recruiting office for the RAF, and the recruiter told us that we wouldn't make the grade with the RAF, so he joined the SAS via some regiment, and I joined the Marines. So it's funny how things work out, and like I say, I was quite glad it panned out that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I figure, like, obviously with the Marines, there's that kind of camaraderie and banter between the Marines and the Paras. But I think we both recognise that they are the two elite units of the British Army. You're going to claim you're better than the Paras. I'm going to claim that I'm better than the Marines. It's just part of it. But that's what makes the units, and I think what makes them thrive to be better units individually. Because of that camaraderie. But I had a guardsman on the desk at the Army Careers Office, and because I'm a tall lad, I've always been a big lad. I was around 85, 90 kilos at 17 years of age and 6'2". He was like, "You make a great guardsman," and I was like, "Nah, that's not for me." So, like I say, off I went to kind of Power Ridge Depot, and the shock and the kind of the brutalness of it soon hit me. And I was never I never struggled with the discipline. I'm quite open about that because my old man was quite a strict old school parent. So the discipline side of it, I knew how to iron. I was already shaving, all the little bits that some people don't necessarily pick up very quickly in depot. But it was the fitness side. Because I'm a big lad, the runs with the platoon commanders, they'd shoot off at 10 stone wet through, and I'm 90 kilo or 80 odd kilo. I find it difficult, the fitness, really, really difficult from the off. And obviously going into a unit like the Paras or the Marines, the fitness is kind of the pinnacle for them as part of the British Army, isn't it?
Yes. So, how was P Company then? Is that
Well, I talk about this quite a lot. For a long time, I was ashamed of the fact that I actually did P Company 3 times in a 6 month period, which is no kind of, it's quite a feat, to be honest. But now I wear it as a little bit, not a badge of an honor. That's probably the kind of wrong word, but a little bit. I'm proud of that fact that I had the mindset to push myself through P Company. Arguably one of the toughest tests in the British Army, 3 times in 6 months, because that's how badly I wanted the Maroon Beret. I didn't want to settle for another unit and transfer to another infantry unit. I wanted to be what I thought was the best unit in the British Army. So, yeah, P Company was tough. I completed 3 P Companies in 6 months. So, to the end, I just didn't acquire enough points on 2 of them through injuries. There's no real excuses. I just wasn't perhaps fit enough, had some niggles. And then, 3rd time, passed with flying colours, and then off to 2 para.
how do you put into words then for people who haven't been involved in that kind of life or that level of endurance? What's that feeling like when you're spent, but you can't give up? If you give up, you're not. Have you already got your lid by that? You get the lid after P Company, and you get your wings after the wings course. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, right. You get presented the maroon beret on the. You get given the maroon beret, which I never really agree with. Years ago, you used to wear like the camouflage caps and the green kind of things that they put on the head. But nowadays, you get given the maroon beret quite early on, but you wear a green backing behind the cap badge, and then when you kind of pass P Company, you get given the maroon beret without the green back. And I don't like that. I prefer the Marines way, where you get given and you earn the Marine beret after you finish like the commando course,
Yeah.
And then you go on, you do an exercise that's horrendous after P Company. That's probably harder than P Company, that people don't know a lot about. And then you go on to Bryce for the last part of training and do your 4 weeks kind of at Bryce Norton. And then you get your wings, your parasmock. And that's the final step of being sort of a qualified paratrooper, and then off to battalion. Yeah.
And how is it then that when you're absolutely drained,
Ah,
how could you describe that?
it's difficult to put into words because there is probably, I don't know, maybe 80-90% of the population that have never pushed themselves beyond what they think is capable. And that's the beauty of doing something like that at a young age, because later on in life, when you think, oh, I'm exhausted, or people are going, oh, this is tiring, you think, no, I know I've got more in the tank. It's mental. It's all mental. The Parachute Regiment, the Marines, all the training that you do for those 2 units, and obviously Special Forces and stuff like that, it goes beyond fitness. You've got injuries. You're absolutely knackered. It's beyond fitness. It's how much do you want it? And you would have seen so many people on your course for the Royal Marines that drop off by the wayside when times get a little bit tough, just because they think that they're tired. They think that their body can't continue, when really it's their brain saying, you know what, do I really want this enough? And then they drop out. So yeah, for anyone watching, it's your kind of body's capable of much more than you think it is. It's your brain that tends to give in first, and your mindset. That's what I believe anyway.
Yeah, we went to Limpston Commando for I think it's our 35th reunion anniversary. So the 35th year since we obviously joined up. And in the what used to be called the induction block, they now call it foundation. For wokish reasons, I suppose. Um, they said, fellas, did you want to come and speak to the new intake? And so I think 3 of us went in, and I looked at these young lads, and they're all the corporal in there said, right, fellas, these chaps have been where you were 35 years ago. I suggest you make this time worthwhile and ask them anything you need to know. And the young lads are like, sir. We're like, you can stop that shit. You don't put your fucking hand up. Just ask us anything. And they said they asked me what's your best bit of advice, and I just said, don't rap. It's that simple. If you want to rap, get to the end of it and then tell them you're gay or something, or whatever it is that they kick you out for these days. I think that's changed. You couldn't be gay in my day. Or just tell them you got a mental health problem or something like that. But if you rat during this 30 weeks, you're going to live with that the rest of your life. And people rat for funny reasons, mate, don't they? You know, they want to go on holiday with a missus or something really kind of temporary. And yeah, I just remember thinking that, because you're going to get this now that especially now you've got a podcast, you meet so many grown blokes like my age that still live with the shame of rapping, even though I tell them forget it. The past don't define you. Be grateful. You might have got killed in the Northern Ireland conflict, mate. You know, it's horses for courses. It's not utterly brilliant all the time. But yeah, people find that hard to get over. If you come across that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, and you've probably heard it as well. It was like the amount of people that you've met along the way that turn around and go, "Oh, I was going to join the paras, but," and then there's always a but. And I had this problem, and I had that, or I did that, and I did that, and I like it's fine. Some of them might be legit, some are, some aren't. But I always think, and I met one guy as I was joining the fire service, bless him, and he says, "Oh, he saw my tattoo, and he was like, oh, he was on my course actually, absolutely lovely lad, Mark." And he said, "Oh, you know, I got to week 5," and he went, "End up in tears, wasn't for me, didn't like it." And I was like, you know what? Hats off. Honest, wasn't for him, upset him. He didn't like being away from his, rather than making up some excuse like, "Oh, you know, this and that." And you know what? I marched myself into the office after feigning P Company for the second time, and I slammed my tabs in with a depot full screw and just said, full screw is a corporal for those that are watching, and just said, "I don't want to be here anymore. I want to transfer to the Green Jackets." And he literally pulled me in the office, and I saw a human side to him. You know, depot screws, as you will remember, are like gods. You don't dare say anything to the scary, horrible people. And he sat me down, made me a brew, which was unheard of. And he said, "I guarantee you've got it in you to pass it on this 3rd attempt. I can see that." It says you're a good paratrooper. You're good at everything else. You just struggle with the fitness side of stuff. And he just said, "If you quit now and transfer, you will regret it." Exactly what you said, for the rest of your life. And he was right. I'm glad I didn't, because once you've got that maroon berry, or you've got that green commando berry, you know, that's it. I know it doesn't define you, but it's something that, like, I look back on that, and that period of time kind of did define me as an adult. I don't know if you feel the same. You know, when you join it, all them lessons you learn going through training and pushing yourself through the physical side of things that we talk about, you take them forward into your future life. And I still draw on them experiences to this day now, and it's 25 years ago, you know.
Yeah, I try to live my life in reality, Chris. Do you know what I mean? I always, no matter how tempting it is to glorify stuff or over egg it, I definitely don't want to be that 55-year-old that every Facebook post I do is about something I did when I was freaking 18.
Yeah, I know. I get
I
that.
do know a lot of people like that, and it's fine. I'm not criticising them, but when I left the main gate for the last time, I literally didn't even look back, mate. I thought that was that part of my life. It was okay, you know. There was some great stuff. Quite proud to come from a broken home and get, my green beret. You meet some really special people. You meet some really challenging people. It was only because Facebook come around. What we talking? 2012. 17 years later, and in all that time, I'd probably seen about 3 Marines that I knew, and I suddenly started to get these friend requests from all these people I served with. It's quite nice. Yeah, it's obviously nice to be back in touch and that sort of thing. So I decided to have a reunion. I thought we'd just nip up the pub, have a pint, catch up. I left the Facebook group open to anyone sort of thing. Woke up the next day and there's over 1,000 people, 1,000 veterans, ex-Marines in it, and a lot of stuff sort of came back to me, and I started to feel a bit like I was a Marine again, just because of all the banter and the memories. And then I started the podcast. Didn't talk about the military. Talked about like things like flying and, you know, skydiving, stuff I consider as a bit more of a productive dialogue. And I decided to just do an episode on my Marines training. And again, wake up the next day, you got 3,000 views when all your other stuff gets like 40 views or 50. And so it's really tempting to go down that route. But now I sort of peel back from the military stuff just because I don't want to sound like I'm offending anyone here, but you know, you got to see the military for what it is. And during all that COVID stuff, the way they was behaving, that wasn't what I joined, mate. You know, wearing that fucking thing on your face and yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to say, Chris, for anyone listening, is like, just live your life, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Do your thing. Don't aspire to do something just because of Call of Duty.
Yeah, I know. I get where you're coming from, and it is. And I was that person for probably maybe 10 years after I left. But I believe that's because probably for 10 years after I left, I was still involved with professions that we'll probably come on to, you know, that were surrounded by military, and certainly with a military kind of background and field to it, you know, the close protection and stuff like that, using weapons, working in teams, all the sort of same stuff. It wasn't until I kind of really joined the fire service later on where I put that chapter behind me, you know, and I've not picked up a weapon now in sort of 15 years or stuff like that. And it is, I've closed that chapter. I love talking to veterans because I think their stories need to be heard, because I think they're getting forgotten again now that the Afghanistan conflicts have come to an end, and it's like a quiet time, and you know, there's people struggling out there. So like I always say, if I can raise a bit of awareness and everything else along the way, as well as talking to interesting people like yourself, then it can only be a good thing, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I went to the Arctic. I think it was not this winter, the 12 months ago, and took some novices up there and taught them how to ski and do the ice breaking drills and all this sort of stuff. And it is kind of funny how all your military side comes back to you. You really do feel like a Marine. And I'm not trying to sell this to anyone who's watching or listening. I'm just saying it there is a part of you, isn't it, that we're called a corps. It's quite kind of ironic that it becomes a part of your corps.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I say before with the Parachute Regiment, again, people once said to me about the Paras and the Marines, they were saying same animal, just different coloured berry. And I go with that to a certain extent. You know, I've worked with a lot of Marines in the past in jobs I've done after, certainly on the anti-piracy. And they're top blokes. You get idiots in all units, you know, but I've met some absolutely outstanding Royal Marines, and I've met some outstanding Mercian kind of guys and rifles and all that as well, you know. So there's good and bad everywhere. But yeah, no, it is weird. And I suppose the Parachute Regiment's a bit like, I used to see it back then as a bit of a cult. And it was a cult. It's a brotherhood. It's a cult. And I understand that now. And I was part of that. And I was all like dressed like the paratrooper when you're out on the lash, bomber jacket, red t-shirt, blue jeans, desi boots. I loved all that. But you kind of, as you get older, you grow up. And basically that's part of it. You grow up, you gain wisdom, you gain knowledge. And you look back and go, yeah, you know, I understand why it's like that, but I'm not that person anymore. I've moved on from that, you know. And exactly what you said, you know.
Mate, let's talk about one of my favourite things, and this is undoubtedly the best course in the military, and that's Bryce Norton. And I was fortunate to do it twice, believe it or not, because my first para course, we did the balloon jump, and then it was cancelled because all the Hercs had to go to the first Gulf War. So
Right.
I went back home and then subsequently back to work, and then I managed to get on another one and finish and get my wings, and I absolutely loved it, Chris. I always made sure I was the first in the door. I used to just hang around when we was embarking or whatever you call it. There's probably a name I've forgotten. I'd hang around at the back so being the last in, I'd be the first out. How did you get on with it?
Yeah, and I always say there's two type of people that there's the people that say that they like jumping, and I think they're either a psychotic or they're lying. So I don't know which category you fall into there, Chris. I'm going to go with psychotic because I don't think you're lying. But no, it is. Military jumping is an acquired taste. It's a bit like Marmite. I did enjoy it after I was out the door and my chute were opened. But that bit being in a herc with kit on and, you know how it is, the smell of aircraft fuel, the air sickness that happens when you're doing low level to some extent. And, it's not for the viewers and followers and stuff that will see this, that it's crazy because free fall, people see skydiving and jumping out of plane and parachuting is skydiving. Skydiving's easy in comparison to military jumping. You've got 150 pounds worth of kit, a weapon system, a reserve chute, cammed up, helmet on, in a hot plane, jumping out of a side of a Hercules at 150 mile an hour or thereabouts. It's insane, but it is a buzz. It is good. And I think for us, just going to Bryce Norton, because you're obviously, when the Marines go down, you're already a Royal Marine Commando. You're already in your battalions and units by then. So you're an established soldier. I'm still a recruit when I go to Bryce Norton. So you're still getting marched around. You're still getting run ragged by. So it's not as enjoyable as if it were if you did it later on. But it's good. It's just good to see how the other half live with the Royal Air Force, with their lobsters and steaks and their food. That was a good bit. You're like, really? I think I have joined the wrong unit here.
Were you balloon jump days or were you the aeroplane?
No, I think the balloon jump stopped early to mid 90s, I would have said. So yeah, it was probably rings true about what you said. 92, 93, maybe. Someone will be able to tell us, after this, I'm certain. But yeah, 97, no, there was no balloon jump. I did the Skyvan jump, which is like a little biplane. That was your first jump. I believe they do all the jumps now out of a herc. There is no balloon or Skyvan. But I also believe that they go to battalion now without their wings because of funding. So they turn up at battalion wingless, called Penguins, I believe, and then they do their jumps course later down the line, whereas I did it as a continuation of my phase 2 training,
Yes, got you. I'm just showing our friends at home, Chris. Sorry, this this was a classic. The in the door. Look up. I can't play the video because it's on YouTube and I'll get some copyright hit. But yeah, I remember doing mine and the PJI. It's PJI, isn't it? Parachute jump instructor, the RAF guy. He come running up to us as we're all in a gaggle, having done the jump and done our first balloon jump. He's like, "Thrall, where's Thrall?" I said, "Here, Corporal." He said, "What do you mean, Geronimo?"
Well, that's what I mean. If you like it, you like it. And being number one in the door as well, fair play to you, because you get to see everything. I quite liked it being a bit further down the plane where you saw someone, the back of someone, shoot, down the plane, then you're out. That was it. Whereas if you're stood in that number one in that door, you get to view everything. And that's if you're not going to go, that is a position that you could be in where you're not going to jump. I've not seen too many people not jump, but it kind of does happen, people do refuse to jump.
Did you have Gurkhas on your course?
I did have some Gurkhas. I have jumped with Gurkhas. They're interesting in the sky, aren't they, Chris?
Yes, very interesting. If you get me up in court, I'm not going to testify to this, but you might have seen the old Gurkha getting thrown out of the aeroplane.
Well, not only that as well, just the whole them. When you get your own clear airspace and you're kind of pulling down on your risers and you telling people to steer away. Gurkhas tend to follow you across the sky, try and get right next to you, and you're like, seriously, I'm trying to get my own clear airspace, because obviously you run the risk of where the canopies collapse and an air steal, as it's commonly known. So yeah, they are a bit of a nightmare when it comes to military jumping. I will testify to that. Yeah.
Yes, very a wonderful country of people, though, isn't it? They love disco dancing. They just loved disco dancing. It was you could always find them up the naffy.
Yeah, they're 100%, and you know they're great guys. You know, we had a whole company of Gurkhas in Tupar. I think it was C Company, Gurkha Company. You know, and they were fearless. They were ferocious, and they were good soldiers. You know, they were, but they had their faults. They didn't go too well with alcohol. Uh, and there used to be quite a lot of scraps involving Gurkhas downtown with civilians and stuff. Some people giving him a bit of stick, and then they wouldn't stand for it. But not from our unit, actually from the civvy population, you know. And then they used to kick off and stuff. But yeah, great guys.
What tours did you do, Chris? Can you give us a quick synopsis? And
Yeah, so I did 3 tours of Northern Ireland. I did Sierra Leone in 1999, 2000 when that kicked off. I did Macedonia as part of the weapon collection after Kosovo, and then I did the first ever Afghanistan tour in Kabul.
gosh, so you saw a bit then. That
I did. I'm honest about the tours I did. You know, the island tours. I did South Armagh and 2 East Tyrone tours, so Knocknacloy and then Besbrook. They were fairly they were great for soldiering, great for patrolling. You know, getting dropped off by a helicopter on patrols, navigating your way around the Cuds. You've got to be on your toes because there were still incidents in the late 90s, 97, 98, where individuals were opened up on, that were shot at, that were sadly some individuals from other units lost their own lives. So you had to be on your toes. But as far as those tours go, they were fairly quiet, and that was a running thing, really. You know, all the tours I went on had a lot of potential for stuff to happen. Certainly Sierra Leone, you're going into a hotbed there where rebels had come into Sierra Leone and into Freetown, and you know, carved up the locals, cut off their arms, cut off their hands, and just generally nasty atrocities. But you know, they didn't really come and try, and we were there to kind of fend them off, but they never really come at us. They kind of stayed in the jungle while we were there. And it's the same. The Macedonia one, brilliant for soldiering, going out, weapon collection, putting in OPs, overwatch positions, patrolling, absolutely brilliant. And for me, you know, the same as Afghanistan. It wasn't till later down the line in the subsequent southern, you know, Afghanistan and Helmand province tours where things got a bit tasty and guys saw the kind of action that they did. So the tours I run, as much as it was very, very busy, I mean, I got a jungle tour in there as well of Belize and Canada, all within 7 years. So it was a busy 7 years. I was never at home. I was, you know, on ops and everything else. But yeah, as far as two-way ranges and, you know, getting rounds down, sadly, I say sadly, you know, but like we say, you have to be careful what you wish for. They were fairly uneventful on that front, you know.
yes. Well, that brings me on to asking you, Chris, why did you leave?
So
No, sorry, I
I said,
said that like it's a bad thing. I'm just curious. Everyone has everyone has that moment when they make the decision to leave, and if you think about it, that's quite. Or some people don't, do they? They stay on the whole career, and again, not judging, but I'm just interested. For you, was there any particular driver?
yeah, well, you know, it's weird because it's a big step leaving your hometown at 17 to join the military. And I feel like once you've been in for 6 or 7 years or longer, it's a big step to then walk away from that family that you've become part of, you know, into the big wide world. And you think you're going to walk out there, land a job that pays the same, you know, you think you're going to find jobs, civilian jobs, interesting. And for me, I always say there was a couple of reasons. We had you know how the head shed changes, you get different sergeant majors, you get different bosses. We had a sergeant major that was particularly not a very nice person, so he made the company atmosphere around D Company at the time a bit miserable. So I was a bit like, that was a bit of a factor. And I happened to get wind through guys that I knew that had gone down the 2-2 route and special forces route of what was coming in Iraq. So this is 2003, 2004. The second Iraq war had kicked off, and there was guys I knew that were going into the close protection, and it was not unheard of, but it was a closed market for guys that were in not SF. So suddenly this door had opened for kind of Power Reg and Marines initially to go and do close protection in Iraq on silly money. So I was like, phew. And it was about 4 or 5 times my salary, what I was on as a Lance Corporal in the Parachute Regiment. It was like £80,000 a year tax free, £9,000 a month. You know, it was insane. So it was a bit like, why would you not go and do that? So that was my driving force, and I left, and I was lucky enough within a few weeks got an interview. I actually applied for the fire service at the same time in 2003, 2004, and was unsuccessful at the interview. So then that was another driving force for me to push down the close protection route, you know.
Yes, just showing your photos here, mate. So sorry, I look like when I look over there, I always feel a bit rude, but
No, that's all right.
I've got my other screen over there. I'm just showing. Yeah, you've got some good photos there. Yeah, that was an interesting one, wasn't it? Again, that's kind of a thing about the military. I don't think a lot of people probably get, or a lot of civilians, I should say, and that is in the Marines. I don't want to say all the blokes because that's a bit of an exaggeration, but a significant percentage were just looking for an excuse to leave as soon as they could, if it meant they could earn more money. And then, of course, we didn't really have that option. Back when I served, people would leave to, say, for example, become a bodyguard for like the Al Fayed family, you know, the Harrods family, something like that. But of course, when the Middle East thing kicked off, then, like you say, you suddenly got this like a golden ticket if you'd been, you know, if you'd served in the forces, especially if you'd been in the Paras or Marines or Special Forces.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, and it was like I say, it was a closed market. It was a very niche market for you know, like you say, them teams you got on the Abramovich team. This is a bit before that. I'm just using that as a future example, but you know, or the Fayad's team and stuff like that. And it was very lucrative. But then all of a sudden, the doors open with the Middle East, and you know, they were asking for guys and girls in droves to come over and sort of, you know, get involved. And it was, I genuinely, I'm completely honest, it sounds like it was for the money for me, but it wasn't. I thought it was an exciting, you know, people didn't believe you when you told them what you were doing. You were like, oh, I'm working as a bodyguard in Iraq doing this, cutting around with an AK-47 in civilian clothes. For civilians and stuff, they were a bit like, it's James Bond kit. Obviously it wasn't like that, but it was, for me, it was like another experience and another chapter I could do. And you know, that was the main driving force, I think, for me.
Yes. So was it Iraq first? Didn't you say you got sacked there pretty quickly?
Yeah, I basically went out there with a company, had an interview down in London. The guy behind the desk, suited and booted, was an ex-guardsman. Wasn't going to employ me because I was under 30. That was some of the stipulations for insurance reasons, that you had to be over 30. I'm 24 years of age. Towards the end of the conversation, he was like, you know, maybe you should come back. He went, who was your officer commanding your company, your OC? Told him the name. And he went, oh, God, I went through Sandhurst with him. He went, I'm still in touch with him now. He left the room, gave him a call, come back in. He went, he says you're good as gold. He says you were, you know, a good lad. You're a good soldier. He says, when do you want to start? You know, you can fly out tomorrow.
Liar, then.
Oh yeah, he was a good liar. Yeah, he obviously didn't know me that well. And I was like, has he got the right person? But obviously, you know. Well, as that turned out, I went out to Kuwait for about a few days, and then went in across the border in vehicles into kind of Basra area. You know, is it called Shiba Log Base? I think it's called, and work for a company. And there was a big click between the Australians, the South Africans, and the Brits. They all kind of stayed in their own little circles. The Australians at the time, or a group of Australian ex-SAS Australian guys, ran the training team. My God. When the first guy came out to brief us, he had a shemag on his head, sunglasses, vest. And I was a bit like, all right, who's this guy? He thinks he's God's gift. And they actually turned out, most of them, to be absolute idiots. and bullies as well, like proper bullying. And I had an altercation with one guy. I not go fully into the story because it's a bit of a long-winded story, but they did something on the ground that in the British Army is completely unacceptable in the way of calling contact as a drill to test you with live ammunition out and about in Vasra without warning anyone. Now, you don't call contact on the ground at all unless it's a real situation. We know that. You used to get crated if you said contact on the radio, didn't you? If you remember rightly, to buy a crate of beer because it was a no-no. So that happened. We had a disagreement, and I ended up punching him several times and getting sacked. So yeah, not my finest moment, but yeah.
Yeah, they come under some scrutiny, the Australian SAS and subsequently the the British SAS for stuff that's gone on in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I like I say, I try not to get involved in political stuff like that because I always find it a little bit a difficult one to, and you'll probably agree with me on this. It's very, very difficult for someone that's never been in a situation where it's life or death and split second thinking to judge you if you've never been there. So you've got people in officers judging people that were on the ground making split decision under extreme pressure. So I always say, yeah, it's not always as cut and dried, and yeah, there is a lot going off at the minute. But like I say, it's difficult to judge, isn't it, without being there?
Yeah, I'm just trying to picture some of the characters you must have come across, you know, in the middle, doing security in the Middle East. Not all of them were your cup of tea.
No, no, you just had guys, and it was lawless. It was like the Wild Wild West. They had bars in the green zone, and I talk about this quite a lot, where you mix in different nationalities, ego central, testosterone central, weapon systems, live ammunition, and alcohol. You know what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
And this was how it was. You had a lot of characters, and people got found out in that industry for being shocking. And that's why you had so many companies, and you had different tiers of companies. Now, I don't mean officially, but there were companies that you get offered jobs with, and you go, no, I'm not working with them because of a bad reputation. And I was very, very lucky to work for four companies, one for a week, so I don't really count that. So three companies that all had really good reputations. And I won't mention that. I mentioned the last one, Aegis, run by Tim Spicer. I've actually had Tim on the podcast, who was the CEO and founder of Aegis. That's a great podcast. That'll be out in a few weeks' time. But they had standards. You had to pass an induction course. You had a uniform dress. You had to shave. You had a uniform. You had flight suits that all looked the same. You had range days. You have full-on, quite difficult fitness tests to pass the induction course. So it was like an offshoot of the British Army. You had these standards that you had to pass to get it. So in effect, that brought up the quality. So I felt very, very lucky to work for them for a couple of years, where the standards were really high.
Yes. Which country did you work for them in?
I only worked close protection in Iraq, and I worked there for 6 years on and off from 2004 to 2010.
So I guess my job as a podcast host, I've got to ask you what was your hairiest moment?
You know what? There's been several moments. This is what I say to you about the 9 lives, and it is a weird one. I'll cover them very, very quickly. The first company or the second company I worked for, we used to be responsible for training local nationals. On this particular day, everyone had to go every day at 8 o'clock in the morning to sign in the local nationals from the outer checkpoint. So in the green zone, you had an outer checkpoint run by the Iraqi army. 100 meters back or so, you had a US call sign that run the inner checkpoint on the entrance to the green zone. We used to go out to the outer checkpoint, Iraqi, and sign in all these local nationals that we were training, weapons, first aid, because we were helping set up the company. On this particular day, for whatever reason, the local army, the Iraqi army, had let them come into the inner checkpoint. As I was signing them in, a massive car bomb went off at the outer checkpoint, killed 17 people, and blew us off our feet. Any other day, if I'd have gone to the outer checkpoint, it'd have killed me outright. So that was one of my first incidents in Iraq where I thought, that were lucky. And this carried on, this carried on. I was ambushed on a contract, an absolutely crazy contract that I worked for on with Aegis called Up Tourist, filming every street and rode in the Baghdad area for US intelligence. And we pulled around into a market area on Boxing Day 2008, I believe, or 2009, to be opened up on in an ambush. 3 vehicles. We were in 3 armored Land Cruisers, complex ambush. My rear gunner Matt killed 3 insurgents. My Land Cruiser had God knows how many holes in it. Start traversing us over rooftops. I've actually got the footage of this, Chris, as the guy dropped his camera in the footwell and filmed up at us. It was maybe about 2.5, 3 minutes, but I can assure you it felt a lot longer.
Yes, I bet. What years were you there, Chris?
2004 to 2010. And answer to your question, the one that made me actually finish working out there wasn't that bad. There was all sorts of IEDs. I'm deaf in my left ear from IEDs. I've actually got the mute sign tattooed behind my left ear because I'm deaf in it because of that reason. Yeah. Have you ever heard of the RKG3 grenades, the armor-piercing stick grenades that deploy on a little parachute when people throw them? Well, they pierce armor. They send a slug through armored vehicles. They're horrible bits of kit. And I've been affected by them twice. One particular occasion, I'd swap drivers with someone just because. So I would drive the front vehicle, you drive the rear vehicle. I always drove the rear vehicle. And on that particular day, that rear vehicle was hit by an RKG3 and fragged the guy in the legs, Matt. So I should have been driving that. But for whatever reason, someone was looking down on me and we just swapped because that's what we did from time to time. And then, what made me leave was someone else later down the line when I was on the Colonel's Close Protection team threw an RKG3 grenade at my vehicle and it actually bounced off the door and never detonated. And if it had detonated, it had killed me and the passenger. And I was a bit like, it wasn't even that bad, but it was a bit like, you know what, you've really pushed it now over a period of 6 years on and off. You know, it's probably time to kind of move on. And it coincided with my son being born, so I was a bit like, went home because of his birth, and then I decided, you know what, I've got someone else to think about now. I've got a child to think about, and I decided not to go back to Iraq.
It's funny you say that because one of my best buddies in the Marines, he had his first child and he went out to Iraq and he got shot dead in Mosul.
Mosul's a particularly bad place, yeah.
And it was, I won't go into circumstances around it, but it was quite, you know, when you hear the story and you know that person in that story, that's your mate. And they actually flashed up footage of him in a documentary. I think it was a documentary about Blackwater I was watching.
Okay.
And he wasn't with Blackwater. I think Blackwater came a lot later. He was out there at the very sort of start. You'd know the company if
more than like, I will just speak off air at the end.
They got ambushed by God knows how many guerrilla fighters. And him and a fellow veteran Marine swung their I think it was in a Land Rover. They swung it around to cut the insurgents off from their client, civilian client. They were on their way to I think it was a oil refinery or a gas works or something. And in the process of cutting off all these pickup trucks, you know, they lost their lives. And it's a funny one, that, isn't it? Going off to a volatile environment when you've got a little nipper at home. I thought about it a lot when I did the Atlantic row, Chris. You know.
Yeah, you've got other stuff to think about, and I understand it. And what happened is with a lot of people that went out to do that work because it was good money. People start to mortgage themselves up and live beyond their means. Now, I don't know your friend. I don't know if that was the case, but I encountered this a lot. So when I never did that, I lived comfortably and never lived beyond my means because you're on pop star wages at the time. You know, you're on more money than members of parliament when you factor in the tax side of it. You know, so it's a difficult one. So people live beyond the means. So when they do something does spook them, or you know it's time to come home, they can't, because they've got these massive mortgages back home, because they've based their mortgage on their salary. But for me, I never did that. So when I always said, once I'd had enough of something, there's nothing in the way my brain works with ADHD and stuff like that. Once I'm no longer interested in it, I'm no longer interested in it. I'll move on to something else. And that there was a lot of other contributing factors. They started to mix the team with local nationals. The standards used to go down. The money dropped. The US government handed power back to the kind of Iraqi government. So there was instances of people, once they'd opened fire, rightly or wrongly, you were no longer protected by the US. So you came under Iraqi law. So there was people getting tried and people getting arrested. I just didn't want part of that. And like I say, the big deciding factor was the birth of my boy. I was like, I've got someone else to think about. I'm no good to him if I'm not here. All the money in the world makes no difference. He needs a father to be at home, or be around more, and probably be on less risk. So that's when I kind of made the decision to come home.
You mentioned something there, ADHD. That's how many of us do you think have got traits of that, Chris?
A lot. A hell of a lot. And I know, and it bugs me a little bit, because I know there's a lot of jokes about it online at the minute. And I know there's a lot of people that think they have it, and there's people that have it that don't know they have it. And it seems to be a big thing at the minute. Now, for me, it was about 4 or 5 years ago. My partner said to me, she went, "Have you ever," my fiance, we've been together about 6 years. She turned around to me and said, "Have you ever been checked out for ADHD or something, because you don't think right? The way your brain works is not normal." And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, not normal. That's how she worded it. But she says, "Have you thought about?" So I did some investigation. I've not gone through an official diagnosis, but I've done umpteen amount of questionnaires. I am in the process of going through an official diagnosis, not for any particular label. I say it all the time. If you know how your brain works, and if you know you have something like that, it's life changing. I used to suffer with anxiety and depression and stuff, not on a massive scale, but I couldn't understand why I had these roller coasters of downs and then highs and lows. Now I understand why. It was one of the symptoms of ADHD. Now I can manage it, and I know how my brain works. It has changed my life. So that's what I say. But I think a lot of veterans, a lot of soldiers that go into certain units, I think a lot of people that go down the SF route, I think you'd be surprised, that have a lot of traits, or they have full-on ADHD. It seems to attract, and one of the symptoms is wanting that adrenaline rush and wanting danger. I'm no expert on the topic. This is my own research that I've done, and a lot of it is my fiance that's done the research. So yeah, I'd be very, very. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of soldiers serving and veterans have ADHD.
Would you say, Chris, and you don't have to go into details or anything, but would you say you experienced childhood trauma?
Yes, it's something I don't go into. It's something I'm not really addressed. And the reason I've not addressed it is because I feel like it doesn't cause me any problems currently, but it is something I would definitely need to address when I'm at some point.
Yeah, I only mention it not to put you on the spot, but I think the public have got this image that PTSD comes from you know extreme violent experiences on the battlefield, and only really service personnel deserve to have that label. And I always try to enlighten people, all the people I meet, and that's not to say that people don't come back from war scarred to the point where they can't reintegrate with normal life, and we all know how that ends up. But by far the majority of people I meet that are struggling, it's the childhood stuff. It's the trait that I think made us want to join up, to sort of when you've been put down all your young life, you want to prove that you can actually do
Yeah,
something.
I think my fiance's on part of the crisis team with the job that she does now, so she's big into all this, and the courses that she's done, and one of the sponsors of the podcast, Sean McCallum, that runs Responder Resilience. You'll see it on my screen on my podcast. You know, they'll tell you quite openly that something like 99% of PTSD and is from childhood. It all links back to something, and it doesn't have to be something horrendous in childhood. It might be a divorce. It might be one particular occasion that affected you. Your brain's very, very immature at that age. It's learning, and it might not take something massive, but you know, I think a lot of the cases do kind of go back to childhood. Again, I'm not an expert, but yeah, it's probably that.
Anti-piracy then on the high seas. I was shown one of your photos earlier. I'll see if I can find it again. Tell us about that, mate.
Well, I came home for a bit with all good intentions of staying at home, but look, it's not easy when you've earned that money, and you know you kind of get accustomed a little bit to the money. Not that I was living beyond my means, but you know it's difficult. You adjust your lifestyle a little bit to good money, and you know the piracy. I saw it as a lot less risk, and it was, and the rotations were a lot better. So I could work a month on, a month off, which is a decent rotation, you know. And I figured why the kids were so young, I might as well kind of make the most of it, and do the month on, a month off. The month back, I had a lot of money to do a lot of stuff with the kid, with my boy. So yeah, I think it was. I got offered it, I took it. And it was kind of based out of Sri Lanka for a company that's based in South Korea. Um, First 6 or 7 trips that I did, there was no weapons. So I had spears, petrol bombs, razor wire on the ship, all weapons made by the chief engineer on the ship as you're sailing past Somalia. So that was an arse twitchy few transits, you know, because like spears and petrol bombs against AK-47s and RPGs doesn't tend to fare too well, but that's just how it was. So yeah, when I said I didn't think it was
It
going
did
to
all
be
right
as
in
dangerous,
Did all right in Zulu.
it did. You're right. You're right. But yeah, I didn't expect that, to be honest. And luckily, after maybe 6 or 7 trips across the Indian Ocean and Gulf of Aden and stuff, the company that I worked for invested in weapons. It was a lot more licensing laws, and again, anti-piracy being in its infancy, there was a lot of struggles with legislation and stuff. But eventually, they got weapon permits, and then we got weapons and stuff.
Yes. What was I going to say? So, off the bat, what was your closest encounter?
So I always say the most dangerous job about the anti-piracy stuff was boarding the ship off the coast of Sri Lanka. With the difference between the pilot boat, you'll being a former Marine, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. When suddenly the ladder's there, then the next thing you know, it's about 7 meters above you, then it's below you. So trying to board the kind of vessels in monsoon season was pretty horrendous. But in 3 years of doing it, I encountered pirates a handful of times. On numerous occasions, all I had to do was show a weapon system to the pirates, and that will be enough, because there is a lot of ships that went through that corridor and through the Gulf of Aden and Red Sea that didn't have armed security on, so they choose to attack them and hijack them rather than people. Enough to show them a weapon system, and 9 times out of 10 that'd be enough to deter them. And I'm not. I've said this the other day actually when I was speaking to someone on another podcast. There's been occasions when I'd be perfect within my rights for self-defense to shoot and kill pirates. I've identified weapons. Weapons are being pointed in my direction. RPGs. I'd be perfectly within my rights to shoot and kill them. But I never chose to. I fired warning shots, and that worked. Now, don't get me wrong, if it escalated further, I'd have to use lethal force. But there are a lot of people, you've probably encountered them as well, that are that way inclined, that would just do it to say that they've done it. Sadly, you know, and the industry there are people like that. They're not too many, but there are people that aren't wired up right in the industries that I've worked in. You will know that as well. But I chose not to use lethal force, and it worked. I don't have to live with that on my conscience. I have to sleep at night knowing that I've killed someone. I don't want that on my conscience.
Have you had Nick Dunn on the podcast?
I have had Nick on yet. I'm waiting to get part 2 done with him, because we did part 1, gosh, probably about 6 months ago, but it's been trying to pin him down for part 2. Yeah.
Yeah. So my mate Mac was on his ship on that security detachment, and I'm pretty sure I've got that right. There's always that grey area where I might be getting two
Yeah.
stories, but I apologise if that's the case. But I'm pretty sure, because I spoke to Mac and he said, Chris, as soon as they came in, so friends at home, the Nick Dunn story, or the Chennai, was it the Chennai Six?
Six,
As
yeah.
they became, because they were imprisoned in Chennai, and they were looking at a long time, and people were fighting to get them out, but they did at least like a couple of years in a Indian prison, Chris, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think they did about. I think he did. I think Nick spent best part of 5 years. I'm pretty certain.
Yes, yeah, it wasn't nice, and they were boarded by the Indian police because they had weapons on board, and bringing them into India then put them in conflict with Indian law. It was something along those lines, wasn't it? And my mate Matt was on board, and he said, Chris, as soon as the law came aboard, he said a load of us just grabbed our passports and just went off the other side and jumped into one of the banana boats, and the people that come out and try and sell you stuff, and we went back, in his case, back to the UK, but Nick wasn't so lucky, was he?
No, and it was a bit of a political statement, I think. Whether they were in, a crossing, it's difficult, isn't it? On land, there's, usually a hard border or a definitive borderline, but in the sea, it's different. You can wander into the wrong waters, and I think they might have just been in the wrong waters. And I think it was more of a political statement. Nick's podcast, he explains it way better than I could about what he experienced and what happened. But yeah, those early days, I think this was a little bit later. I think it was towards the end of me finishing my time out there. So I would have done the piracy before Nick were out there. But yeah, certainly there was, again, like the close protection in Iraq, it was pretty much lawless, and people were just cuffing it. There were a lot of companies that wouldn't have weapon permits, and because they were so cheap to buy rusty old AK-47s off the coast of Africa or Yemen or wherever, that they'd go into waters that they knew they didn't have any permits. They'd just throw the weapons overboard before they go into them waters. So somewhere in the Indian Ocean, there's a massive pile of AK-47s under the water. So,
Chris, is that an SLR you've got?
It is an FN, a Belgian FN SLR. Yes.
I'll tell you what, I'm glad you had the experience to fire one, because it really puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
It's got a kick on it, and I could see why they used them, because you've got the range 7.62, you've got the range on the vessels to keep the pirates at bay, whereas I think a 5.56, you're going to be a bit closer. But the idea, I think, for the 7.6 was so you can shoot out engine blocks, and you'd be able to do that with 1 or 2 rounds with an SLR quite effectively from maybe 200-300 meters. If you could shoot, that is. It's no good if you can't shoot.
We were issued them. I was on a very small detachment on board an aircraft carrier, protecting things that I'm probably not allowed to say, but which everyone can guess. Things that go bang, I mean.
Yeah.
And we were issued the SLR for that, SLR and a 9mm, and I just felt so fortunate that this weapon I'd heard so much about from the Falklands era, that funny enough, they only stopped it probably about the year before I joined training. We swapped. We were one of the first troops through with the SA-80 or that kind of era at least, and to be on the range with an SLR and just see the accuracy, even with iron sights, and see how the wind doesn't affect it hardly so much, being able to chuck that heavy slug 300 meters and feel it go off, and then to see that target drop at 300 meters was just from a sort of ballistics rifleman perspective, it was a good experience.
Yeah, a good bit of kit, but obviously they kind of moved towards the 5.56, didn't they? The lesser caliber and stuff like that with the SA80A1, which wasn't renowned for being the greatest of rifles. But the A2, I believe, and the one that they use now, which is a variant, is actually considered. So I hear. I don't know how true it is. The guys and girls will be able to tell me that use it, as I've never fired the kind of later versions. But apparently, it's a really really good weapon system now.
Yeah, I never had any complaints about the SA80 other than, I mean, all those things that all of us who served at that time know what was going on. But when it's all that you know, and our platoon weapons instructor in training made it quite clear, this is a good weapon, folks. Don't listen to people telling you it's not. Obviously, everyone's going to have an opinion on that. The Armalite
Yeah,
or the M16 probably would have been a better choice, but I think they just wanted to keep it with a British company,
yeah.
so that the money went to a British contract rather than an American one. But I think it was Dave Radband on the podcast said in Afghanistan that light round wasn't heavy enough to stop someone who's under the influence of drugs, who's charging at you, who's got Allah on their side. It just wasn't, apparently wasn't stopping people effectively enough, so that they got issued a 7.62, didn't they? You'd probably know the name of it better than I would, but
I don't know. I don't know. I know they used, obviously they still had the GPMG as their kind of platoon sort of heavy weapon, but I don't know if they had variants of the SA80 that changed the caliber. I don't know. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't have thought so. Maybe they got issued different weapon
it
systems. I don't
wasn't a
know.
variant of the SC80. It was this. Oh, I'm not even sure if it was if you'd call it a carbine. I'm not really like big on weapons, Chris. It's not something
No,
I got.
I always saw them as a little bit like if it's a tool, it's like a joiner would see a hammer, or that's how I see it. So when I left that behind, I know there is a lot of people that get fascinated with weapon systems, but I saw them as a tool that enabled me to do my job, and that's it.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. Um, yes, same here. My point was, I just really enjoyed firing the SLR. I really like the 9mm pistol as well. Sorry, the SMG as well. That was a unique experience. Not really not the best weapon in the world, but I just like the fact you could really feel the recoil. You could feel that spring coming back. Um,
Well,
yes,
I was never really a good shot in the. I never failed a APWT. I think they were called back then. I never failed one of them, but I'd scraped through. But it wasn't until I worked in Iraq and I started to use like an M4 rifle where that has very little recoil and everything else. Where I was actually really really good using an M4. We used to carry M4s and SIGs. She used to carry SIG pistols. I can't remember for the life of me the variant, but yeah, them two. I didn't like the Glock because it kind of felt light and plasticky, whereas the SIG actually felt like a proper weapon system. Something about pistols when they're a bit too light, I couldn't quite take to them. But I'm no expert on weapons anyway. It was just like I say, I saw them as tools to the job. Once I finished using them, that was it. I'm not fascinated with them now. I'm not bothered if I never pick one up again, to be honest.
yes. Let's move on to boxing then. You've done a bit of that, Chris.
I have. I've done a little bit. I've got me two belts here for an organ. I don't claim to be a great boxer. I fought on the unlicensed scene. I was a boxing fan for years. I did a little bit in the military. Um, and then basically where it came about, I was on leave from the anti-piracy, and I decided to sign up for a white collar fight where you fight in a nightclub against someone that's has the same amount of training as you. You train for 8 weeks. I went away and trained on a ship. It's for charity. I did all my own training on the ship because that's all we could do on the ship. I used to run around these oil tankers. I used to train like 3 times a day. So I was absolutely ridiculously fit. Came back, and yeah, I fought a kind of white collar fight against big youth, big black lad, 6'6", about 18 stone. My dad came to watch it and he was like, "You can leave now, son, if you want. You don't have to fight him." I was like, "I'll be all right. Don't worry about it." So, got stuck in. I think we got fight of the night. I think I got a draw. The first ever fight I fought on, I got a draw. He was just monstrous. I'm a big lad, but he dwarfed me. I think you've got a picture of it there of his squaring off and everything else. But I kind of took a bit of a taste for it, and this sort of coincided with me joining the fire service. So I ended up fighting over a sort of 6-7 year period, 14 times at heavyweight on the unlicensed circuit. Lost once to a guy that went on to turn pro and be ranked 18th in the UK. And my claim to fame in the boxing world is I beat a guy that then went on after fighting me to become the world bare knuckle heavyweight champion at the O2, fighting Dorian Darch. So I beat this guy called Jody, who went on to be world bare knuckle. So I did all right, but if anyone ever sees my fights, they're on my YouTube channel. They're not. I spar very, very good and very technically. I spar, but as soon as I get in a ring, I get drawn into a tear up, and because I was always quite fit, cardio wise, the fitness sort of carried me through. But they don't look pretty, Chris. I'm not going to lie to you.
I've had my first, other than the milling that we do in training, that surprises a lot of players. We don't realise we do. Well, I don't know what it's like now, but we did milling as well, mate.
I think a lot of units did. Yeah, but it was part of P Company, wasn't it? For us.
And I won't go on about it now, but my God, that was some experience. I haven't had
the whole. Go on, sorry, pal.
No, go on.
But the whole milling thing for me was where I found out that I could. So I talk about this, and this is completely true. I serve with enough guys. I never make up any stuff on anything like this because there's far too many people out there that know me, that follow me. So everything I tell you is true. So I did 3 P companies, as I said, and I milled twice on the first P company, battered the 2 guys that I milled against. I milled twice on the second P company and battered the 2 guys that I milled against, and then I got a bit too big for my boots and got drawn against a big Scouse lad, and he ended up really taking it to me, and we got a draw. So I was renowned when I went to 2-Para with a nickname of Hammer Hands, right? And as an 18-year-old, I've talked about this a lot again. As an 18-year-old turning up at 2-Para in Aldershot in the late 90s, having a nickname at 18 as Hammer Hands is not the best thing you want to have. So, I had a lot of hairy arse paratroopers, Falklands vets, and the likes of horrible, scary people looking, "Who's this Hammer Hands?" And I'm like, they're like, "Yeah, that's me. It doesn't mean anything, sorry."
Mm-hmm.
But that's where it started off, when I realized I could kind of punch a bit. What carried me through, good fitness and big punch and the ability to take a punch. And I fought for the last time last April for the fire service at 44 years of age. And you know what? I won in 52 seconds and I won this blue belt here. But in that 52 seconds, I hurt my shoulder and tore my hamstring. So that was the sign to say, you're a bit too old for that game now. So I've hung them up now. Never say never, but I've kind of hung them up.
Yeah, I think the full-on bouts is... I don't know if I'll be up for that, but I started kickboxing a year ago.
Oh, wow. Good skills.
Yeah, just something I always wanted to do, but just never got round to it. We did half a day of unarmed combat in Marines training, which, again, I think a lot of people would be surprised at. And I did a year of judo when I was at comprehensive, and I was quite good at that. But... no, what it was is my little one went to taekwondo, and every year they have a Christmas party, and he got, even as a toddler, he got his black belt, which was, we was obviously all really proud for him for, and at the Christmas party, all the black belts, and they're all quite young, they all go dressed in a suit, which I thought was really special, to host the people like me, the parents, and all this sort of stuff. And they give out the latest round of belts is given out at the Christmas bash. And one of the people that got up to get a black belt was a woman, I don't know, in her late 40s, maybe 50s. And my girlfriend and I, we were just so impressed. We were like, we got to do that, you know. So one of the best decisions I ever made, mate. It's really good fun, you know. Do a bit of a warm up, do some, you know, fitness exercises and that kind of thing. Nothing too, you know, nothing too boisterous, you could say.
But they're great. They're great for cardio, you know, them sort of sports. And I don't think people understand when it comes to boxing and sports like that, how much cardio and how much fitness is involved. And, you know, a lot of people will look at them sort of sports and go, oh, I could do that. And then very quickly, within 60 seconds of doing a bit of sparring or a bit of pad work, think, oh, okay, this is a bit more tricky then. So I don't think people fully appreciate the fitness required for kind of combat sports, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. That milling, I think we only did 3 1.5 minute rounds. It's the hardest thing you're ever going to do. Harder
Oh,
than
yeah.
you're more ball bagged on that than any of the commando tests, and that's saying something, you know.
Yeah.
No. Chris, podcasting, or can you tell us your Gordon Ramsay story if you're allowed to?
Yeah, I for a long while I didn't mention it. I did in between working on the ships. I did surveillance. I did a surveillance course run by a guy called Peter Jenkins, ex Royal Marine. He's got a book out on surveillance. Runs a course up in North Yorkshire, Skipton, I believe it is. So I did his surveillance course, and I was already working in the industry, but I decided to do a surveillance course. And I did a lot of work for BBC Rogue Traders, if you remember the program BBC Rogue
Yeah, I
Traders.
remember you. This is when you were telling me, which made me remember the Gordon Ramsay thing.
Yeah, so I did all the Rogue Trader stuff, and through the company I was a self-employed surveillance kind of contractor, and I get work from various different companies, the BBC, and this company that I was kind of registered with in the Nottingham area, they have a website that basically have offices all over the country, and they took a call from Gordon Ramsay asking, basically they wanted a surveillance operator or a surveillance team to go down to London and follow his father-in-law around London because he was allegedly embezzling money out of the company to basically furnish and fund a lifestyle with someone in the company that they didn't know who he was having an affair with. So yeah, I went down to London with my cameras and kit, and it was meant to be a team, but the company decided to cut a few corners, so I was on it pretty much on my own, and followed Gordon Ramsay's father-in-law around London, which is a task in itself. Being on your own, anyone that does surveillance know that you need 1 or 2 cars and a team. But somehow, through intelligence that have been gathered, I was able to, follow him around London and get all these incredible pictures, which I can't really talk about because they've never been released. They were sealed documents in the court case. But yeah, I compiled a report and put it in to Gordon Ramsay, and he went to court and won, I think 5 or 3.5 million in damages against his father-in-law, and that was pretty much all my work. So again, true story. I have proof of this if anyone ever wanted to question it. But yeah, so yeah, it's one of them.
When his father-in-law was in court, did the judge do the 2 slices of bread thing?
I have no idea.
What are you? An idiot sandwich?
Yeah, but he kind of, I got paid handsomely for the 2 weeks. It was good money, but I always joke about the fact that my missus has some sort of weird kind of crush on Gordon Ramsay for whatever reason. So I always say, if Gordon Ramsay ever happens to see this, please would you treat us to a meal at one of your restaurants?
Did you ever get to meet Gordon?
I didn't know. I got a message from him thanking me for the kind of work that I'd done, but that was pretty much it. Which you'd expect, I was just someone that he used to employed for that, not employed, but contracted for that period. But yeah, it's my claim to fame. There is another one as well, but I cannot talk about the professional footballer involved because there is a scope for me in the future to actually go and be interviewed by him about it. So that one to look out for in the future. That's all I'll say on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Gordon's son joined the Marines, didn't he?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I did hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's called Jack. Yeah, I wonder if he swears as much as his dad.
Quite probable.
Right. So let's come on then. Fire service.
Yep.
Yes. Lots of veterans or lots of people leave the services, don't they, and join the fire service. It must be a sort of hand in glove thing with the fitness and the discipline and the sort of
absolutely.
boldness.
Yeah, and what surprised me is I've been out 10 years out the military and done all the kind of close protection, anti-piracy, surveillance stuff. So I wasn't really I was in a disciplined kind of industries, if you like, but it was a bit of a shock to the system joining the fire service. Now, I won't talk about what fire service or what service I'm part of just as a firefighter, but when you join the fire service, I did a 17-week training kind of course to get into the fire service. Took me 3 attempts over 10 years to actually get into the fire service because it's that amount of people that apply, for 12 or 24 positions. So yeah, 17-week training course, and it is a shock to the system. I was back to bullying boots and everything else, and the instructors were like, "Oh, see Binch, he'll show you how to bull boots," and I was a bit like, "Well, I never bought a pair of boots in Power Edge," so I was a bit like, "How am I gonna, explain this one?" But yeah, so we kind of.
How come you never had to do that? Sorry, am I missing something?
No, you never. For Power Edge, it wasn't a thing that you did. Your boots had to be shiny in your locker, but you didn't bull boot. When you went on courses, we had to have bulled boots and stuff. But we always did courses with guardsmen. So we'd just pay the guardsmen to bull our boots.
What did you do on parade then when you're wearing your number one uniform?
I never wore, in the whole 7 years I was in the Parachute Regiment, I never wore my smart uniform once.
Don't you pass out in it?
I didn't. I passed out in green kit because I was going straight to Northern Ireland. So
Wow.
I didn't have time to have a proper pass out. I passed out in camouflage green kit, 95 jacket on the parade square. I didn't even wear my number 2s. Never got to wear them in the whole time I was in.
Wow. So in the Paracent, is drill, other than obviously everyone does basic drill, but in the Marines pass out, it's quite a sort of spectacular day, you could say. You're doing all this formation drill with ammunition, albeit blank ammunition, obviously, so you don't shoot, your mother-in-law. But it's trying to think.
It's a day for the families and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like a big ceremonial thing, isn't it?
But funny enough, we didn't do a lot of drill because our drill sergeant, he liked to drink a lot the night before. So he used to just rock up on the parade square and say, "Fellas, just thin yourself out, go back to the accommodation and polish your boots," right? So we didn't actually, but he really came good about a week, about 2 weeks before our pass out parade, and he just got it. He knew what he's capable of, basically. And we had a really great pass out parade, but. What I'm getting at is right from sort of the second week, you're sat there with a little tin of water, the lid of your parade gloss, which is your Kiwi boot polish, but a special type. You got the lid with a bit of water in. You got some cotton wool, and you just put on the polish, and then you polish it with, I can't even remember now, but polish it with water. And some of the lads are just so good at it. I was always, just scrape a pass at this sort of thing. And then when you got to your unit, you didn't do any of that. You got something called Jacobean dark oak furniture paint.
Yeah.
And you just painted
And
them.
it stayed on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think we broadcast that, but that's what people did. So mate, I'm just a bit surprised about that you can
Yeah,
get.
I don't. I think some courses that came through did have pass outs and they wore the number twos, but we had a massive shortage in two para at the time, and they needed people to literally go to battalion and straight on Northern Ireland training. So I didn't have any leave after training. I think I had a weekend, prayed on down in Aldershot on the Monday, and then that was me straight off to Lyd and do all the training pre Northern Ireland. So I passed out I didn't really have that much of a pass out. My mum and dad obviously came up, but it was you were pretty much taken straight off and then straight down to your battalion. So I think it's more of a big thing now with the parachute regiment recruits. I know there's just been one recently that my best mate, who's former SBS, he went up and went up there to kind of with a few other people to see the next generation of paratroopers pass off the square. So I think it is a big deal now, but it wasn't certainly like that. You would have had to have bald boots if you were wearing your number two dress and stuff like that. But like I say, the time I was in, because it was kind of a busy period, I never wore number two dress and I didn't pass out in number two dress. So yeah, myself, I was also a little bit disappointed that at some point I'd have liked to, but yeah, I never had it on once. I had the number twos, but never wore them.
So there you are. You're a trained firefighter. How long was it before you got a call out?
I think it wasn't very long. I went to a fairly busy station in a kind of a suburb of where I live that has some poverty, and poverty leads to house fires. So I went out, I think, to an RTC quite quickly. And it wasn't long. I think it was only maybe 2 or 3 shifts before I had my first house fire. And that whole 9 lives thing again followed me into my first ever house fire, where I went in with the team leader. And when you're a young kind of probational firefighter, you have red diamonds on the side of your fire helmet. To basically, you've got 2 years of probation where you're learning, where you have to meet targets, you get tested out on the drill yard, you have to tick so much stuff off. You go back to training school and do like a final assessment after 2 years. So you got these red diamonds on. So I go in with my BA partner, sadly, who's no longer with us. He died just last year, I believe, out of the blue. But yeah, we went into this house fire and we should have gone left. You never go above the fire. There was a big long hallway. You should have gone left into the living room. Smoke billowing out the windows. Should have gone left around the living room and into the kitchen, but we didn't. We missed the door because it was thick as a bag, smoky. You couldn't see anything and hot. And walked down the hallway and got to the end of the hallway and realised we must have missed the door. And this was 30 seconds, a minute. Turn around and come back. And we were just about to go through to the door in the living room, and a massive bag of cylinders and aerosols exploded and blew the kitchen window 30 meters up the garden, 30 foot up the garden. And basically, we would have worked out that if we'd have gone the right way and gone left around the living room, we'd have walked through the kitchen door as it exploded. I'm not saying it would have killed us, but it would have seriously injured us. It blew out bricks out the side of the wall. And it blew the window up the garden. So yeah, it was one of them. It's like, why did we not go left? We just went down the hallway. We missed the door. So this has been a reoccurring theme throughout. And that was my first ever house fire and my BA wear. So crazy.
Yes. And friend of mine, Stephen Charles, he was been in the fire brigade a number of years, and he's wrote a couple of books, When the Bells Go Down and Blood, Sweat and Tears. He's been on a podcast a couple of times. Lovely chap, Steve. And he was saying, probably a bit like the military, you develop quite a, I want to say macabre sense of humour, but you kind of got to deal with some serious stuff, Chris.
Yeah, I wouldn't, you go with that term dark sense of humor, and it is because you have to, if you took everything that you saw and did on a day-to-day basis seriously or took it to heart, then you'd be a mess. You would. There's no two ways about it. Now, we know from the military that the best way to face adversity is to joke about it and take the mickey out of each other. And that runs into the fire service. I believe that runs into the police, runs into the ambulance service, prison service. I think it runs in. I was a prison officer for 12 weeks as well. I forgot to mention that bit, but it wasn't for me. Way back in between working in Iraq. But yeah, so that sense of humor is in kind of parts throughout, and yeah, it is, and it's not meant in malice. It is just a dark sense of humor that you have to kind of joke about the things that you see and do, because otherwise I think you'd probably fry your brain. And we do see it. We see it all the time. People do struggle with their mental health. They mask it, they hide it. And I think a good release is by sitting around the table and having a good laugh and joke about and taking a mickey out of each other. I just think that's human nature.
Is it sort of part of the job for every firefighter that you're going to come across some pretty severe scenes?
I would say so, yeah. Obviously, it depends on the station you go to. There are sleepy stations, as they call, like little sleepy hollows, where the stations aren't as busy. But you'd be hard pushed to get through your career in the fire service in anywhere in the UK without seeing something nasty. Now, like I say, I'm at a station where there are a lot of, I've lost count of house fires, and I have pulled people out of house fires. Sadly, not all of them have survived. I have cut people out of road traffic collisions with horrendous injuries. But again, it's part and parcel of the job, And I think if you was stood back at one of these RTCs, actually focusing in on the casualty and looking at their wounds, you'd probably it affect you more. But when you're doing your job and you're busy at these incidents, you don't have time to focus on you're cutting a door off, you're splinting someone's leg, you're putting a tourniquet on, you know what I mean? You're making the vehicle stabilize, you're making it safe. So you don't have time to take it all in. And I think that's a bit of a saving grace, to be honest.
So, what's the biggest cause of house fires, and what's the biggest cause of road traffic accident?
I'd probably say one of the biggest still with road traffic collisions would be mobile phones, and I'm only surmising here. I don't know the figures, but I would probably say mobile phones and drink driving still to this day, or drug driving. And then when it comes to house fires, you'd be surprised how many people still don't own smoke alarms. And I say it all the time. People don't realize how much a smoke alarm will give you that early warning to get out of a house fire. Now, people see it on films that think that they can run out of an house fire or run into an house fire with a rag around their mouth like they do in the Hollywood movies. I can assure you, one lungful of the stuff that's in that house when it's fully on fire will render you unconscious very, very, very quickly. So, smoke alarms, the lack of smoke alarms is still probably the contributing factor, not the cause, but the reason why people die if they don't, because they don't have smoke alarm. But probably smoking, electrical appliances. People still put the dishwashers and washing machines on at night because they think, well, I'll get it done at night. Electricity is cheaper or whatever it is they think. And these things do malfunction. So yeah, there are a number of things, but sadly they still happen.
Well, you've done your job today, mate, because I've learnt some in there. We always put our dishwasher on at night.
Don't put it on at night, because it only takes one electrical fault on that and these things go up. I have seen it. I've gone into house fires where the flames are coming out the back door like a blowtorch as a result of a malfunctioning washing machine, dishwasher, and the big one is a tumble dryer.
Wow. There's that thing though, isn't there? I think you might relate to this. And again, I'm not trying to be rude to anyone, but when you deal with people that haven't been around death, they don't get it the way that you do they? And you tell them to do things, and they just think you're being like over the top.
You've got to see it. You've got to see it. And I was the same. I was completely the same before I joined the fire service. I was like, yeah, whatever. That blasé attitude. But when you've seen the damage and you've seen how hot, I've been into house fires that have blistered my fire helmet because it's been that hot. You can't stand up in them. Smoke alarms have melted off the ceiling. The plaster's melted off. And, closing your doors at night is massive. You close one of your doors, your internal doors, can potentially hold a fire back for about 20 minutes and hold the smoke back, enabling you for the smoke alarm to go off and get out. And people don't understand it. And they still won't even listen to me say this now or taking fun. Sadly, some people have to experience it themselves to understand it. And, you know, I've experienced it and been on the other end of it, of going in and pulling people out of house fires. And it's, you know, if you could see what I had seen and my colleagues had seen and a lot of firefighters around the country and world, you would do shut the doors, buy smoke alarms, you know, not put your dishwasher on, those sort of things, you know.
Absolutely. So, Chris, want to just come on to your wonderful podcast? It's a passion we both share.
Absolutely, pal.
Yes. What made you decide to start a podcast?
Well, obviously, we've been through sort of my career and obviously your career. You know, you've done very, very similar sort of stuff with the military and stuff. Now, mental health is obviously prevalent and it's going to be prevalent. It's prevalent everywhere, but I think it's probably more prevalent in the kind of military communities, you know, the close protection industries, people, fire service, the police force, you know, frontline kind of responders that go out there and see these nasty things on a day-to-day basis. It's going to get to a point where people have, you know, get too much. There's always a stigma around it about not talking about it because I'm too tough to talk about it, or I don't need to address it. I don't need. So the idea was, I've lost countless amount of friends through suicide or attempted suicide along the way. So I always wanted to do a podcast, and I thought, well, why not do it and kind of with the main goal of raising awareness for mental health across, you know, for the military veterans and emergency services communities. So that's kind of where the idea came from. I know there's loads of people, and I'm not the sort of person that thinks, well, you know, I'm not going to help them, or there's enough love to go around. And I think it's great that people are on podcasts and talking about it. You know, I've been a guest on several. I know you've been a guest on mine, and people, there's a lot to talk about. You might get a story from me on this podcast that's not going to get, you know, that I'm not going to give away on another podcast. So they're all different. They appeal to different viewers. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to do something. You get to a point in your life, don't you, where you feel like I've done a fair amount of stuff over my life, and I've been very fortunate to come out fairly unscathed. But I'm at a point now, I'm comfortable in life, things are good. So now's the opportunity I get to probably give something back to people, you know. And that's kind of why I do the podcast. I do it for selfish reasons as well. I'm not going to lie. I enjoy speaking to interesting people. I take something away from every single guest that comes on the podcast. I take a little bit of information that I can take forward into my life to make my life better. So yeah, there are selfish reasons. I'd love to turn it into a kind of a proper business further down the line. But for now, if I can help just one person reach out and get rid of that stigma that it's okay to talk and express your feelings without fear of being judged, you know. And the idea is, well, I get big tough Royal Marines, former SES people. I've had 7-time world champion, you know, boxer Shane Mosley on, UFC fighters, actors, comedians. It's such a varied sort of guests, but you know, not all share their stories with mental health. Not all have experienced problems with their own mental health, but I just think someone or majority of people can relate to something. So it's just about saying that anyone can talk about it, you know.
Yes, absolutely. And shouldn't talk favourites, should we? But which guests have you kind of really, or could you just highlight some incidences where you've had a guest that's been a cracking chat?
Yeah, you know, but they've all been cracking chats, and not all are celebrities as such or sports people. I had a guy called, you know, I've had quite a few Falklands veterans on, and obviously the Falklands being ingrained in Parachute Regiment history, as I'm sure it is in the Royal Marines history. So getting to talk to some of the kind of legends that served down south, they've probably been my, highlights, some of the Falklands veterans. And I'm hopefully going to get a few more on. And I've actually hopefully getting an Aden veteran on, because there's not many, bless them, not many left still alive from the kind of Aden and the Radflan and the conflicts in the 60s. So yeah, any of the military kind of the veterans have been good, but Shane Mosley, again, 7-time world champion boxer, Hall of Famer, fought Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather. He was a great chat, and what a lovely guy.
Yes, the Falklands one. How can I ask how old you are, Chris?
I am 45 this year.
Yeah, so you're a bit younger than when the conflict came out, or actually happened.
I was two when in '82 when it happened. Yeah.
Yeah. The only reason I say that is I was 82, so I would have been 12. And I remember, my mate's dad going off down there, leading. He was a sergeant major in Lima Company, 4-2 Commando, and I remember we were somewhere like Southampton or Pompey when the ships had come back in, or a ship, and the M5. M5 and the A38 was just packed with cars, jammed with servicemen and buses, and it was just a big old thing, mate, And so to chat with some of these people that served down, I just find it quite emotional. I don't think, obviously not everyone has a different conflict, don't they? But when you read some of the books, and I've just literally finished reading one yesterday that somebody sent me, what these guys went through, and they were barely out their teens, a lot of them. I mean, some of them, my friend Davey was allegedly the youngest person to serve, or one of the youngest to serve down there. I think they kept him on ship when he was 17 and let him go ashore because he had his 18th birthday. But it's in yeah, just insane what they went through, hey?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the first guests I had on, who's a lovely bloke, Mick Southall, he was actually one of my instructors on my Lance Corporal course when I was going through in Power Edge. And he was 17 on Longdon when he went down, because I don't think they had that. It wasn't a bit like back then. Like when I joined, you had to be 18 to go to Northern Ireland or conflict. I think that changed after the Falklands. But so you could be 17 when you went on into the Falklands. So Mick was 17 and fought on Longdon. And, some of the fiercest fighting on the island at the time. And yeah, 17 years of age. It's just, you can't get your head around it. The kind of thumbnail and headline I put was that when he came back from the Falklands, he went to buy a pint in the pub and they wouldn't serve him because he were under 18. And it was like, so you're old enough to go to war, but you're not old enough to buy a pint. And you just think it's crazy. And they're fascinating stories, and you can see the emotion when they're telling their stories of the Falklands conflict. So, yeah, I find the Falklands conflict and the veterans absolutely fascinating. And like I say, because it was legends like that were the forefathers, if you like, of us coming through training, the future generations of paratroopers. Every generation has a generation to look up on, look back on. I look back on the Falklands veterans. You'll have people joining now that look back on the Afghan veterans and the Iraq veterans, So, and before that, you go back to sort of the Suez crisis and the Second World War and the likes of. So every generation has a generation that they look up to, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just flagging a picture here of one such gentleman was Jimmy O'Connell. Have you had Jimmy on your show?
I haven't, no.
I'm not sure if he's doing podcasts at the moment, because these guys still go through a lot, mate, don't they? It's
yeah, absolutely,
lot of trauma and stuff. But he wrote a fantastic book about Longdon. There's been a few good books written specifically about Longdon. And he came on the podcast. That was a fascinating chat. Do you think the is a changing face of warfare now, though? Back when, well, certainly when I served, you put a bit of cam cream on your face, you went into the forest, and you could sort of disappear. Do you know what I mean? And do like Second World War sort of stuff,
Yeah.
style fighting. When you look at these drone videos that have coming out of Ukraine, imagine now you're yomping towards Port Stanley, and there's some 17-year-old kid in a porter cabin operating a drone. He's all right. Here they come. Do you know what I mean? Just wings it out across the mountains. It's totally changed the face of combat.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Firstly, it's not yomping, it's tabbing, Chris. So I don't know where you got that yomping from, but
Matt, I've had bad influences in my life. You just have to forgive me.
Marines yomp, Paris tab. We know. But yeah, the kind of no. I had this conversation again. I had a really interesting chat with a guy about this, and his question to me was, "Do you think the individual discipline and fitness as a young soldier is still important now, going off what you've just said about the training?" And my opinion basically is I still think the standards should be set, because you fall back on that discipline, you fall back on that physical fitness when times get hard. And warfare might be different, and it might be easier because you can use, not easier, that's probably the wrong term, but changing. You can use drones. There might not be the need for fighting like we've seen in in past conflicts, but I still think there might be the opportunity that comes into play. So the discipline and the physical fitness and all them attributes that we would have been taught still are important. But yeah, no, absolutely, warfare is changing. It's ever going to change. Technology is advancing, and it's scary watching these drone footage now, that some of these drones are being operated from the UK, not the UK, sorry, but from neighboring countries. That's how advanced the technology is. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, different face of warfare. Anyone signing up today? I've got news for you. It's not like playing soldiers like it was in our day, or our train. I remember our exercises, Chris, was, some of them were just quite good fun, because you were running around the forest firing blank rounds at each other. A drone, I don't even think we would have known what a drone was back then. We obviously didn't even have mobile phones then. Everything's changed so much that, good luck if you're joining the military now, I'd say.
Yeah, it's different. There are roles. You could be a drone operator. I mean, we work hand in hand with the police. They have drone operators now. Brilliant. The fire service have a joint one with the police, which is brilliant. You can put it up over burning buildings. You get a full 360 view of what's on fire, and they have their place, certainly, but it's just a bit scary. Certainly with AI and stuff now, you just don't know where it's heading. And I put a post out the other day. I don't get too involved in politics, but I asked the question. I don't tend to give my views as such, but I asked the question, and it was quite simply, knowing what you know now as a veteran, would you go to a conflict? Would you do what you did, knowing that how the government treat veterans? And it's a difficult question, because I didn't join for the government. I joined because I wanted to do the job and I wanted to work alongside my comrades. But it's a fair question, isn't it? Knowing how veterans have been treated and how they're getting investigated for this and for that and being thrown under the bus, it would appear. It's a bit difficult to say whether I do what I did again,
Yes. Yeah, we're going to go open a can of worms, mate, if we go down that route.
I just thought I'd put it out there.
Yeah, no, mate, and it's good. It's good that you do. It's good that you do. I think the world's controlled by how can you say, a network of sociopaths, i.e., conscienceless individuals. I think they create all these conflicts for their own for their own gain. And I think we were slightly sort of gullible when we joined because we didn't have internet and we only had...
We have social media, did we?
Yeah, we only had the sort of Second World War rhetoric, which came out of Hollywood, which is Hollywood's version. And then you got to ask, who owns Hollywood? But yeah, we'll save that one for another day, Chris, eh?
Well, it does. It opens a whole can of worms, doesn't it, with different stuff. And like I always say, I take media, I keep media kind of coverage and what I believe in the media arm's length. And like you say, back in our day, I think the media was probably a bit more honest than what it is today. And there wasn't the influences of social media, like you say, different takes, different views. I see people all the time post stuff on social media just because they think it's right and it's factually wrong. And you're just a bit like, I see it all the time. And I've done it myself, and that's how I've learned to, I've posted something and then I've actually been challenged about it and done the research and it's absolute crap. So I don't do that now. I try and post positivity, not negativity. I don't even call out the people. I don't get many trolls or haters, to be fair. But you get the odd people that just want to provoke and cause an argument. I don't even engage. I'm not asked. I just want to spread positivity and go about, when you've been through and done certain things over your life, you're not bothered about the opinions of certain people. You know what I mean? I'm happy in my own skin, as it were.
Chris, what are the sort of what have you come up against starting a podcast? What are the kind of idiosyncrasies that strike you? Challenges, this sort of stuff.
With the technology side, or just as a whole?
Just all of it. I mean, it's just little things. Like, because like yourself, I do an internet podcast, as in I'm not in the room with the person, although I have done those in the past. The amount of people that rock up with a laptop, and it's the bane of my life because the cameras on a laptop tend to be low, not high quality.
Yeah.
I've just bought a laptop, actually. I actually made sure it was a full HD camera on it. But people think, oh, I'm on a podcast, I better use my laptop and not my phone. And I'm like, no, use your smartphone because it's... the technology, the camera on a smartphone is really, really sophisticated. So just little things like that. Have you got your quirky stuff?
Yeah, well, I kind of, you pointed some of these things out because when I had you on the podcast was in its infancy. And I hope now that people can see how I'm evolving. I don't make any money from it at the minute. Hopefully that will change down the line. So I'm having to buy bits and bobs. I bought a mic, I bought a better cam. The background's changed a little bit. So I am evolving the podcast. And I think that's clear to see through the quality of my videos. And I did the first one on Skype on my phone, and with Lucas Brown, former heavyweight champion of the world. It looked like it was filmed on a potato. You know what I mean? And there's little bits, and the technology's been a learning curve. For people of my generation, I know I'm not old as such, but 45. Technology's moving at such a rate that I can't keep up. So it's been a learning curve. This last year, that's how long it's just gone over the anniversary of a year since the start of the podcast. The technology side of thing has been the proper head scratcher of getting around, and I've moved on to using different platforms. I use a Riverside platform, which is proving okay at the minute, but sometimes it's not compatible with my Chromebook. I have some audio issues. But it records it to the cloud as well. So if you do have issues, they can be fixed. All the tracks are individually recorded. So your voice will be individually recorded and mine also. So you've got two separate tracks. So there's a lot you can do with that. It's got an AI editor on it. So you can literally bang out 12 clips. It edits 12 clips for you with subtitles. So it just makes... when you're not doing it full time and you have a full-time profession as a firefighter like me, and you have your kids over twice a week and stuff like that. So managing it with different things, because I think the first episode took me about 3 days to edit. I'm not even lying. And now I can edit a full episode in an hour with clips and everything else. So yeah, I just think it's a learning curve and sticking with it. I think people give up quite quickly on these things because they see their views and because you're getting 200 views. But someone pointed out to me that this month, in fact, is going to be the biggest month for me, where I've had 50,000 views this month. And I'm still a bit like, 50,000 views. But if someone pointed out to me that you're nearly filling, Old Trafford, I don't know, an example, a football stadium of people every month to listen to you talk to guests, you'd be like, when you put it like that, I'm like, oh yeah, I think it's because you see these big celebrities or these big YouTubers having millions upon millions of views. You think, 50,000 over a month's not a lot, but really you've got to take it as little wins, and be consistent and just keep at it, and believe in what you're doing. And I certainly do believe that I'm doing good and I'm putting out good content, and it's evolving as we go. So it's ever changing, and hopefully the quality is getting better,
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got a real knack for getting some great guests, Chris.
Yeah, I think I've had stalking orders put out on me with quite a few of these guests over the time. And it's just, I was on the verge, I think I talked to you before, of going down the route with a marketing company and stuff. And you advised me, along with a few of us, not to, because the reason I get guests is because I am who I am. I send them a message, and then sometimes they'll send me and then I have a phone call with them, and they tend to take to my personality. And that's how come I've had a lot of these guests. Literally, I had a really big Hollywood actor on the podcast, and he messaged me, and I watched him comment, and he has this uncanny knack to feel like, he says, I felt like I'd known Chris for 20 years when we were talking, and that's just me. I don't do that on purpose. That's just the sort of person I am. So I'm able to somehow strike up a bit of a rapport with the guests. Whether that's through messages, through being cheeky, I take a bit of Mickey out of them, and they kind of see this human side, and it works for me, So yeah, I don't know how I do it, but the guests I've got lined up and I've got backed up, ready to be released, are pretty incredible as well. Yeah.
Brilliant, mate. Well, on that note, a nice positive. I shall thank you very much for being on the Bought the T-Shirt podcast.
No, thank you very much for having me, mate. I really, really appreciate it. I'm a big fan of yours and kind of all the bits and bobs you do. So no, it's been my absolute pleasure.
Yes, and just want to give one last mention of our world record.
Not something we'll hold now.
Yeah, it's just a silly little something, mate, isn't it? Like I said to you, I only got the certificate printed off, Chris, because it looks better in a social media post if you're actually, you're holding it and your face is in it. You can't really post a PDF file, but live podcast from the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Congratulations. I'll put a link below, folks, if you want to watch that podcast, you want to see what life is like in an Atlantic rowing boat for 50 days. I think Louie and I we gave you a tour of our boat as well, Chris, didn't we?
Yeah, you did. You gave me a really, really good tour, and like I say, I was amazed by the quality of the link up that you got on, and it's a really good insight to the kind of space and the limited resources you have, and the kind of isolation that you've got for that 50, 60 days or however long it kind of takes you to do it. So yeah, really, really good, and I think people will look at that in a different light when they see it.
Excellent. Mate, stay on the line just so I can thank you properly. I'm just going to play us out. Friends at home, massive love to you all. Thank you so much for listening to the two Chris's. If you can do the like and subscribe thing and hit the notification bell, that would be awesome. And we will see you soon. Thank you.
'Cause I've been living life